All right, well, good morning. It's good being here. It's good being back. Just want to let you guys know, we were gone last week. Cindy and I, we were at a wedding out in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and today's our Family Sunday, and so I just want to welcome those that are joining us online, those of you that are here as well, and just it's important that we are just understanding we are a family, and last week when we were away, it was kind of a bittersweet trip. We got together. Last 3 years we've got with our friends, their sons, each one of their sons, their three sons got married, one each the last 2 years, and then this year, so we flew out there. And it was exciting seeing him getting married. Just the whole wedding was just about the gospel, just focusing on the person of Christ. But during our time there, our good friend Terry, her mom had a stroke the night before the wedding, and she ended up passing away while we were waiting to get on our plane to fly back here. But I just want to say it's important that we are connected as a family because it meant a lot to us. We posted on our app just the prayer requests, and our men's group, we got together. I mean, I just texted out to those guys, hey, be praying, because we didn't know how things were going to pan out. A number of guys just responded back, and some others here at the church. I know not a lot of you knew about that, but it just felt really good. We felt the prayer, the power of you guys' prayer, being with us and there with the family. And so being a family, a church family, is so important, and being able to connect with each other and being there to support each other. So I just want to say thank you guys. And this is our Family Sunday, so we have our kids in here, and I know some are like, oh man, the kids, they're like, Jim's not very fun, it's going to be boring, sitting through this. But it really is an important part of who we are as a church family. That our kids get to be a part of seeing who we are, what we do as we come and worship our God together, because they are the church, right? We're not waiting for them to be the church. They are the church. And so we want them to be a part of this. And so we've been in this series for the last several weeks now called Running with the Giants. And so the kids are probably wondering, man, giants, right? It's like, what kind of giant are you talking about? So we're not talking about physical giants, big, tall giants. We're talking about giants of the faith. Men and women that have gone before us, that just had incredible faith, that endured some of the craziest things that they went through in their life. And so kind of what we talked about in this series is that as if we were running this race, as the scripture says that our faith is like a race, like we're running this race. And so we're just kind of looking at if in Hebrews chapter 11, there's all these great men and women, these giants of the faith, and if they could just step out of the grandstands for a brief moment while we're running, just one day, just come alongside us, run, what would they tell us? How could they encourage us through all the challenges that we go through along our journey? And so we've looked at Noah, right? How many of you kids learned about Noah back in kids' church? I know, Mike, you were back in kids, right? Because you teach back in kids' church. Thank you for, right? So you helped participate back there, right? So you learned about Noah, and then we looked at Rahab, right? Rahab, probably heard about Rahab, and then we looked at Abraham, who just had crazy kind of faith. And last week, Roger shared with us about Jacob, right? Jacob who wrestled with God and just the crazy things that Jacob went through. And we're going to kind of overlap a little bit of Jacob, as today we're going to be talking about Joseph, all right? Talking about Joseph. Now, kids that are with us, what do you know most about Joseph? Any kids want to respond? What do you know most about Joseph? All right, Ben, what do you know? That's right. His brothers threw him down a well. Your brothers would never do that, though, right? Tim, your dad says, yeah, they would. Yeah. Now, my brother probably would. He's a lot bigger than I am. All right, so we're talking about Joseph today. And Joseph, I actually taught on Joseph a couple years ago, and I talked about how Joseph was kind of throwing a bunch of lemons, right, in his life, and that, what did Joseph learn to do with lemons? He made lemonade, right? So there's some good things that come out of lemons, even though lemons has a negative connotation. He learned to make lemonade. So we're going to look at some different aspects of Joseph today, and we really want to look at if Joseph could come alongside us and run one lap on the race, what would he say? What would he say to encourage us? I'm going to tie in a couple different things today, but I think the overall arching thing, looking at Joseph's life and what he went through, is that Joseph would tell us this: don't give up on God's dream for you. I think that's what he would tell us. Don't give up on God's dream for you. Now, I purposely worded it this way because it'd be easy to say, don't give up on your dreams, right? We've heard that phrase before, right? Matter of fact, in our culture, we kind of have this phrase that we say, when you ask somebody, say, how you doing? Then they say, just living the dream, right? What does that even mean, right? Just living the dream, living the American dream. I got everything I want, doing everything I want, just loving life, living the dream, right? Well, when it comes to Joseph, it's a very different picture because Joseph went through some crazy stuff, right? And so just saying live in the dream, there was a part where he was kind of would probably feel like I'm just living the dream because things are going really well. But there were some crazy things that he went through. So let's just kind of give a little overview of Joseph. Now, Joseph was the second youngest son of Jacob. We learned about Jacob last week, right? And so Jacob's an old guy, an old man now, and he has this son, Joseph. And Joseph, man, he was just the pride of his old age. Like, man, I find kind of like Abraham with Isaac, right? Joseph's like, man, Jacob's like, I got Joseph. This kid is great. And he played favorites with Joseph. We're going to see here in a moment. Just created some real mess in their family. And so Jacob becomes, remember, God changed his name to Israel. What does Israel mean? Did Roger teach you anything last week? I'm just scared, just messing. All right, so Israel means one who contends with God and prevails, right? So here God changes Jacob's name because Jacob means deceiver, right? Because he was always playing tricks and deceiving. He deceived his brother, stole his birthright, then he deceived his uncle Laban, right? So God says, no, I don't want you to stay in the muck of your past. I'm going to change your name. And so Joseph, so Jacob, he's this old man now. He has Joseph, and Joseph is so special to him. So we're going to pick up in verse 37. And so what I was going to say was that Jacob's sons, the 12 sons, become the 12 tribes of Israel. All right, so he has these 12 boys. Couldn't imagine what it'd be like parenting 12 boys, but I'm sure it was a lot of fun. So Genesis 37, yeah, it's rough just raising one son, right? And then you got a little baby brother. Yeah, he wants to preach. You want to come up here and preach with me? Yeah, he said, yeah. That's what Family Sunday's all about, right? You're awesome, Colton. I don't care what. Your dad's sitting there going like this, quiet. You keep talking, brother. You're going to be a priest someday. All right, Genesis 37, starting in verse 1. We're going to look at this whole story. It says, so Jacob settled again in the land of Canaan. Remember, Canaan is where God told Abraham to go, right? Far away from his home to get this land of Canaan. It says where his father had lived as a foreigner, referring to Isaac. So Abraham and Isaac, now Jacob. He comes back from being with his uncle Laban. He's settling back in Canaan. Verse 2, this is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, so we got a teenager here, right? He often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. Now, I just want to pause here a moment and say this. Every teenager needs a job. Right? I mean, and I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm just saying every teenager needs a job. I mean, we see this in the scripture. I mean, that was the way that they lived. I mean, their kids, they worked with them. They did the family business together. And it just helps us. I mean, I remember when I was a teenager, before I was even old enough to get a work permit, 14 years old, I was working at a guy who owned a garden store. My brother got hired on because he was a year older than me. I couldn't work there, but he came to me and he said, hey, how would you like to work out at my house? It's kind of slow over the summer, so I'm going to send your brother with you, and you're going to go work at my house. I was like, sure, I would love to go work at your house and make some money, right? It was paid cash, right? So 14 years old, and before that I mowed grass and stuff, so I had some experience mowing. So he's like, I want you guys to mow the grass. I want you to rake the leaves. I want you to clean the pool, do all these things, clean the gutters. We're slave labor. But anyway, we're working for this guy. He went to my church and, working and being paid cash. And they had an older guy who had this little pipe, and he'd sit on the tailgate of his truck, and he'd light his pipe, and he'd sit there carving his apple. And it was like, are we going to get started? I'm 14 years old, right? I'm a teenager. I'm ready to go to work and do something. And the old guy's just sitting there carving his apple. We're sitting there for like 40 minutes, doing nothing. It's like, this guy's going to come home and we're going to be in trouble, And so then we finally start doing some work, and we're hanging out there, and mowing and raking and cleaning. And then it's like, okay, guys, come on, boys, we're going to go in and watch TV. It's like, what? Watch TV? This isn't work, And so I remember this whole story about Joseph. So I did what Joseph did. Let's go on to this verse here. It says, but Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Right? I mean, that's exactly what I did. I might go home. It's like, what my brother did, Mom? He's hanging out with George. This old guy's name was George, and he's just out there just hardly doing anything. It's like the owner's going to come home at any moment. I'm going to get paid. I don't want to go home empty-handed, right? So I was a little tattletale. How many of you kids are tattletales? Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's not. All right. So he's like, Joseph comes back and reports all these things that his brothers were doing that were not good, right? So there's a couple times I did that when I was a kid. Didn't help me any. Anyway, in verse 3, going on here, it says, so Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day, Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. Now, I just want to pause here and say, some of the families in the Bible are so dysfunctional. Right? I mean, that's just not even right. How many of you parents have a favorite kid? Right? I mean, it's like, come on, really? It's like, come on, I couldn't imagine, being a parent and having a favorite kid. I mean, Cindy and I, we have a favorite kid. She's not here, I'll just tell you that. She just helped lead worship. I'm just being in trouble, But it was funny, when our kids were little growing up, it's like, oh, we know who your favorite is. We always joke around, we know who your favorite is. We have a favorite grandkid. We don't have a favorite kid because we only have one grandkid, right? So anyway, so this is just really dysfunctional that Jacob is playing favorites with Joseph. And he goes out and he gets him this coat, this robe of many colors. And it really made a huge statement. I mean, I remember when my brother was old enough to get the keys to the car. He got his driver's license, he could drive, and I was like, he's better than me, right? I'm not old enough yet. I can't wait till I can get the keys to the car. Well, Jacob makes this huge statement by getting Joseph this robe because as he's a teenager working, the type of cloak that you would wear would be very short, easy to maneuver and move around in as you're chopping down wheat and grain and all these different things and raising, animals and stuff. But he gives Joseph this long robe that's multicolored. It's something a prince would wear, a king would wear. So when he goes out and he's hanging out with his brothers, it is a statement. I'm better than you. Right? I mean, it's this huge statement that his dad just stirs this craziness up in the family. And so it goes on in verse 4, and it says this, it says, but his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. And so at this point, Joseph, if you were to go up to him and say, Joseph, how's your life? He would say, I'm just living the dream, right? I mean, things are great right now. My dad treats me better than any of the other sons that are all older. I got this robe. I'm standing out. I'm something important. And he's feeling really special. But it's creating this animosity that then builds over the course of his life. Going on in verse 5, it says this. It says, one night, Joseph had a dream. This is where we get back to the whole part about the dream, right? One night Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever, right? Because he goes up, he's got his robe on, he's like, guys, I had this dream. And this is how it goes, verse 6. He goes up to his brothers, he says, listen to this dream, guys. He said, we were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Except he probably wasn't. Right? Because he had this big fancy robe on. We're tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly, my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine. Yeah, nah. Your bundles bowed before mine. Anybody ever have a crazy dream? Right? About you, your family bowing down to you, your brothers, right? So it's crazy. And so his brothers responded. There's already this animosity that his dad started. His brothers responded, so you think you will be our king, do you? Because that's the symbol of this robe. It's like he's just intentionally stirring up just trouble here with his sons, right? So he says, so you think you'll be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Verse 9, soon Joseph had another dream, and again he told his brothers about it. Let me just pause here. Don't tell your family about your dreams. they're going to kill you for it, right? So he goes on, he tells them, I had another dream. Guys, come here, we got to huddle in, we got to hear this dream I had. He says, listen, I've had another dream, he said. The sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowed low before me. Now, this is symbolic. When it's talking about the heavenly, things like stars and moon, I mean, like these are high positions. They're now bowing before me. In verse 10, it says, this time he told the dream to his father as well as to his brothers, but his father scolded him. What kind of dream is that? Right? His father's like scolding him for it. He asked, will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you? Now, I really don't think that scolding is what Joseph needed at this point. I think Joseph needed something much more intentional. I think Joseph needed some input. He needed some godly input, some godly counsel in helping him through this. But it tells us in verse 11, this animosity is building. But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, it says his father began to wonder. He wondered what the dream meant. Now, why would Jacob wonder what the dream meant? Because if you remember in the story of Jacob, Jacob had some crazy dreams as well. Right? One day, as he was traveling to his uncle Laban's, he stops in a place called, I don't remember what it's called, but he changed it. He called it Bethel, right? And so he lays down one night. I know my brain's not working this morning. I still have jet lag from 2 hours being behind in New Mexico last week. So he lays down, and he puts his head on a rock, and he has this dream that the heavens open, and there's what?
Stairs.
Ladder. Yeah, there's this ladder, right, going up to heaven, right? And there's angels going up and down. And so he wakes up, he's like, man, this is the place of God. This is a place to worship. And so he calls it Bethel, right? This house of worship. And so Jacob's wondering at this point, it's like, so what is the significance of these dreams that Joseph is having? And so I think that Joseph, if he could just come down out of the grandstands and come run out and run one lap with us on the track, I think that Joseph would say, look, don't give up on the dreams that God has for you because of this. The first thing, number one, he would say, especially when you are young. Especially when you are young. Now we have some of our young people in here today, and I think the reason why he would say, don't give up on God's dream for when you're young, because there's so many things, as it says in Hebrews 12, the verse in the bumper video, that there's things that are going to trip us up along the course of the way. And the challenge is when we're young, we're just trying to figure this thing out, right? I remember my first week at college, in the college campus, I didn't know what I was doing. I had my horn, right? I'm going to go study. I'm going to be a jazz musician, but I didn't have a clue what it was going to be like. I'm just trying to figure out life, right? And so sometimes when we're young, we're just trying to figure things out, and we make a lot of mistakes along that time when we're a young person. And what we need is somebody that's farther along in the faith, the giant in the faith, to come alongside us to help us, to help coach us and help teach us how to wear the robe. You see, the robe that Jacob gave Joseph, it was his calling. It was his calling. God gave him the dreams. Those dreams were intentional. They were for a future time. He just didn't know it. He didn't know how to appropriate them. He didn't know how to understand them and how to make sense of them. And so he's wearing this robe. He's got this calling on his life, but he needed someone to help him, not scold him, right? But Jacob didn't have anybody to help him either, right? So this is why it's so important that we're a family. And we see as we're raising this young generation, we come alongside them. And we coach them, we encourage them, we speak into their life. When they start having dreams, we help them understand what God's plan is, what God's dream is for them. And that's what Joseph needed. He needed a mentor to come alongside and help him. Now, I don't think that Joseph was intentionally trying to make his brothers mad. Right? He's just a kid, and sometimes there's a little bit of arrogance when we're young, right? We're a little kind of full of ourselves when we're young, right? That's why they say women live longer than men, because when guys are young, we think we can speed in a car when we get our driver's license, right? We can go faster than anybody else, and that's why guys get in more wrecks. That's why insurance costs more, because we think we're invincible, right? We think we can do anything. And so sometimes we need some help, and I don't think Joseph was really trying to be a spoiled brat. He's just trying to make sense of these crazy dreams. And he's just longing for some feedback, and he's verbalizing, guess what, guys, I had this dream, and you guys all bowed below me, right? I mean, I'd be like, yeah, you tell me that dream one more time, right? And so it's just creating these very awkward, crazy moments in his family. Now, I was thinking about this past week as I was prepping this. I was thinking about how there's all these things as a kid, that we try to help our kids plan for life. And it's like all these achievements that we're hoping that they're going to get. Right? So I remember when I was a kid, I started studying music, went to creative arts school, and as I go to competition, I get a little badge to put on, I get a little trophy. I went to music camp, I got a trophy, an award, and I got all these certificates, perfect attendance, graduated in the top 10 of my class, right? It's all these different things along the way, all these trophies and stuff you get as a kid. And as I look back, and I'm thinking, man, I just wish that there was just someone to help me mentor me through all this stuff when it comes to walking with God, because of all those trophies. You know where they all are? They're not. That's where they belong, is in the trash. But they're not in the trash because I'm a pack rat. Anyway, so I've got this chest in my basement, that I took when I went on a mission trip to China, this chest. And one day my mom and dad were like, come and get this stuff out of my house, right? And so I got all these art drawings that I've drawn, all these trophies. They've been locked in that case in my basement for 16 years in the house that we live in. I have no idea why it's there, why I've held onto them. But of all the achievements of everything that I got as a kid, there's only one thing that's ever made an impact on my life. And it was the thing that I got when I went through confirmation. I shared this a couple weeks ago when I took my first communion. And what I was given for passing a test, becoming a member of the church, was my very first Bible. And I still have it. And written on the inside of this Bible is the date that it was given to me on June 25th, 1972. Some of you are like, what? Man, you are old. Right? June 25th, 1972. I wore this thing out when I was in college. The binding's a mess. I took some fake leather and made a cover for it, but it is the only thing I took with me to college. Out of all those achievements, all those awards. And I think about that. I think, so what are we telling our kids? What's the most important things in life? And the guy that led me to Christ, my first week on campus, saw that I had this Bible. I wasn't using it. But I took it with me. It was on my shelf above my desk. And he got it out, and he read to me and explained to me how to give my life to Christ. Change my eternity. Change the direction, the course and direction of my life when I'm just trying to make sense of it. And what I needed, it was the same thing Joseph needed. I needed somebody to come alongside and help me and coach me and guide me along the way to make sense of this. I didn't know how to wear the robe. I didn't understand that I had a calling on my life. And so we all need that. And so here, Joseph's just trying to make sense of this. Let's go on in Genesis chapter 37, starting in verse 19. Then his brothers are out in the field, and Jacob's sending him out to go out and be with your brothers, make sure they're doing okay. And so his brother sees him coming from a distance. Verse 19, they say, "Here comes the dreamer," they said. Verse 20, "Come on, let's kill him." And like Ben shared with us earlier, let's kill him. Let's throw him into one of these cisterns. All right, it's this empty well. We can tell our father a wild animal has eaten him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. Whenever God puts dreams in our hearts, you can always count that there's going to be somebody that's not going to like them. We have an enemy, right, who wants to just steal and kill and destroy. And sometimes people have good intentions, but sometimes they just do wrong things, and they just want to kill the dreams that God's put in our heart. Well, that doesn't make any sense, right? And they'll just say all kinds of things along the course of the way. And so because of this animosity with Joseph and his brothers, it's like they could care less about his dreams. Let's show him what those dreams mean. So they just take him and they throw him in this cistern. It says here in verse 23, it says, "So when Joseph arrived, his brothers, what? They ripped off the beautiful robe he was wearing." That's what the enemy wants to do to us. He wants to rip the calling away from us. Each and every one of us in this room have a calling from God, whether you realize it or not. And there's others, and through the work of the enemy, wants to strip us and rip us of that calling that God has for us. Verse 24 says that they grabbed him and they threw him into the cistern. They just throw him. It's like, man, we are so frustrated and angry with you. We're just going to let you rot here and die. Here's what we think of your dreams. And it tells us the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. So if Joseph could come alongside us and run one lap, I think he would say, look, don't give up on God's dreams for you, especially when you're young, because you're just trying to figure this whole thing out. And you need someone to kind of help you along the way. And I think the second thing he would say, don't give up on God's dream for you when you get thrown into the pit of setbacks. Because there's going to be a lot of setbacks along the journey, right? Unexpected things come our way. And there's going to be people sometimes around us in the workplace, in our neighborhood, wherever, that sometimes they may have good intentions, but they're just so frustrated and angry that they're out to get us. And it's the work of the enemy. And sometimes there's just so many times where we just get set back and we get stuck in this pit. And the challenge is that when we're in the pit, all you can see are the walls. We have this limited perspective. We can't see how to get out of the pit. Right? We can look up and we can see there's an opening, but there's just no way to get to that opening. There's no way to get out. And so it's easy to feel trapped. And then in those moments, it's easy. It's like, God, I don't know how I'm ever going to fulfill the calling that you have on my life. Because this pit is too deep, and I don't know how to get out of it. And it's so easy to lose perspective when we are in the pit. And so while Joseph is down there in the pit, one of his brothers is pleading for his life. And he's like, come on, let's not kill him. And they see these Ishmaelite traders coming, and they say, let's sell him into slavery, right? So now, one moment he's living the dream, right? Everything's going great. Next moment, his brothers have an opportunity. He's out there, out in the fields. They throw him into this pit. And then they see these Ishmaelite traders coming by. It's like, let's sell him into slavery. And so he goes to a guy named Potiphar who was under Pharaoh of Egypt, and he becomes a slave. But this is what happens in Joseph's life. This is what's so important. He could come alongside and say, learn from the things that I did. So let's look here at Genesis chapter 39. We're going to skip a couple chapters. Genesis 39, starting in verse 2. His whole world has changed. He went from the pit, now he's in Potiphar's house, he's a slave. It says this, the Lord was with Joseph. So he what? He just got out of the pit, and now he's a slave. But it says that Joseph, he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. He is no longer free. He is a slave. Yet everything he did, he wholeheartedly did it unto the Lord. Verse 3 tells us this. Potiphar, his master, Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. Now, in this moment, let's think about it. We've all been through this, right? We get thrown in the pit, and then we're just in these unforeseen circumstances. It's so easy in those moments to get bitter and resentful. I can't wait till I go back and see my brothers, right? Because I'm just so angry now at what they've done to me. He's far away from home. He is now down in Egypt, probably learning a new language. His whole world is turned upside down. And Joseph, everything he does, he's succeeding at it. And so I think if Joseph could come down and just run one lap with us. He went through so many things. Say, look, when you're young, don't give up on God's dream for you, especially when you're young. Don't give up on God's dream for you when you're thrown into the pit of setbacks. And I think a third thing he would say is don't give up on God's dream for you when you seem enslaved to your circumstances. Because there's just times when we just feel like we're just serving time, right? We're not in prison, but we feel like we're serving time, right? We're just enslaved to our circumstances. And sometimes it just feels like there's just no way out of this. I'm just stuck here. I'm never going to get the promotion I was hoping I would get. Things are never going to turn out the way I thought they would turn out. All right, the person of my dreams, whatever it is, we're all in different situations. And sometimes we just feel enslaved to our circumstances. And this was a major setback for Joseph. He had everything. He was his dad's pride and joy, yet he continued to work hard, and he succeeded in everything that he did. He learned how to make lemonade out of lemons, right? What a great lesson learned. He learned how to make lemonade out of lemons in this whole thing. He learned how to make lemonade out of lemons. Can't speak, all right? So here he's working hard, and God, the Lord is with him, and he's just being blessed in everything he's doing, and Potiphar notices it. I think people in the world should notice how we work. We should stand out among everybody else in the world as Christ followers. That's what Joseph, he's standing out. And then one day, because he was also really good looking, Potiphar's wife took notice of him. And then she falsely accuses him of doing something that he didn't do. And it cost him his job. Anybody ever have somebody falsely accuse you of something you didn't do? And it's hard. It is hard to go through that. And so it says here in chapter 39, verse 19, it says, Potiphar was furious when he heard his wife's story about Joseph and how he had treated her. He's a complete lie. Joseph did everything with integrity, but she completely lies about him because she didn't get what she wanted, right? Verse 20 says, so he took Joseph and threw him into the prison where the king's prisoners were held, and there he remained. So here one moment, he's living the dream. Right? I mean, he's got his robe. I mean, he's thinking, man, I'm dreaming my brothers and my mom and dad, they're all going to bow before me. And my dad's just treating me special. I'm living the dream. I don't even have to work anymore because I got this nice robe. I can go out in the fields and tell my brothers all these crazy dreams. And then he ends up in a pit. And then he ends up as a slave. And now he's ended up in prison. Talk about setback after setback after setback. And it would be really hard in those moments and through those circumstances to hold on to the promises of God and the dreams and the calling that he has on your life. Right? It'd be really hard. And so Joseph, if he could step out of the bleachers and come down and run one lap with us, I think a fourth thing he would say is, don't give up on God's dream for you when you feel imprisoned in defeat. Because there's going to be times when you're just going to be completely defeated. Like I didn't throw myself in the pit. Somebody else threw me in the pit. I didn't become a slave because I wanted to. I was forced into slavery. My brothers sold me. They treated me wrong. And now I'm falsely accused of something that I didn't do. And now I'm in prison. That would be really hard to overcome. Right? But it's not the end. It's not the end of Joseph's story. And I remember years ago when I was working, that somebody lied. Somebody over me lied to another person. And they thought that I was the one that lied. And I just remember for several years trying to convince them, look, I'm not the one that lied. It was this other person. If there's one thing I hate lying. I hate lies, right? Because we know when you find out that somebody's lied, it really hurts. I mean, it's like, it takes a long time to regain trust when there's a lie. And I could not convince them. And it's your character, right? I mean, I can only imagine for Job, it's like, look, I work hard at everything that I do. This is my character, and there's no way to defend yourself. You get thrown into prison. You lose your job. Everything just changes. And here this other person lied, and I couldn't prove it. But I remember 2 years after that moment, that couple came to me. Because they found out that it was another person that lied. A person that shouldn't lie, lied. And they came back and they asked forgiveness. And there was restoration that took place in that moment. But for Joseph, it's like, man, he's stuck. There is no restoration. Potiphar's wife never went back and said, look, I lied. I lost my cool and had some thoughts I shouldn't have had. And so he is stuck in prison. But here's the deal. Here's how Joseph responded when he got imprisoned in defeat. It goes on, verse 21 and verse 39. It says, but the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. Let's read that together. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. We should all memorize that verse. What a great verse. Because there's so many times when we experience major setbacks and defeat in this journey. And that verse, Joseph's mindset, he just kept going, doing, he's like, I'm just holding on. I had that dream when I was a kid, and I'm just holding on to that dream. And it says, the Lord was with Joseph while he was in prison, and he showed him his faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph what? A favorite. Right? What was he when he was with his dad? He was a favorite. What was he when he was with Potiphar? He was a favorite, right? Now he's in prison and he's a favorite because he's living his life with integrity. It says, Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Now, I think at this point in time, Joseph's learned how to appropriate these dreams, right? How to interact with those around him because we grow over time. Right? So it says in verse 22, it says, before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. That is crazy. But this is what's going on because he's being faithful and just working hard. Verse 23, it says, the warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. Joseph held on to the dreams that God gave him. That someday things are going to be good once again. And he just went from setback to setback to setback, and he could have been completely bitter, imprisoned. And then one day when he was in prison, there was the butler, right, the baker, and then there was this cupbearer to Pharaoh that were both thrown in prison because of something they didn't do right. And they both have these dreams. And they can't make any sense of it. But guess who is in the prison and hears these dreams? And God gives them the interpretation. But they forget about Joseph. Golly, come on! It's like, come on, you said you would tell Pharaoh and you forget all about me. I'm the one that got you out of prison. Now you completely forget about me. But then one day, the cupbearer, right, remembers. He remembers when Pharaoh has a dream. Now it's important. Pharaoh has a dream about these fat and skinny cows, right? 7 fat cows, 7 skinny cows. This doesn't make any sense. You ever have a dream about cows? I mean, you probably had crazy dreams, right? I've never had a dream about you had a dream about cows? All right, Darby's had, he's a farmer. I'm sure he dreams about his cows all the time. They're not fat enough, right? Right on, right? It's not good when you're dreaming about skinny cows. You need fat cows, right? So Pharaoh's trying to make sense of this, and then Joseph is remembered. And so then it goes on in verse 37, it says this. This is in chapter 41. Joseph he interprets through God, gives him the interpretation of his dream. It says, Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials. So Pharaoh asked his officials, can we find anyone else like this man, so obviously filled with the Spirit of God? Now that verse could have easily said, could we find anyone else like this so filled with bitterness and rage and resentment for what he's been through, how other people treated him, how they lied about him, how they wronged him, how they threw him in a pit. But no, it says, can we find anyone else like this man so obviously filled with the Spirit of God? Then verse 39 says, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are. Verse 40, you will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than yours. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt. He is now standing before the most powerful man in the world. And Pharaoh puts him in charge of everything because he held on to the dream that God had put in his heart. So if Joseph could come down out of the grandstands and run one lap with us, he would tell us, look, don't give up on God's dream for you, especially when you're young. Hold on to your calling. Hold on to the dreams that God's put in your heart because it's going to work out someday. Just hold on. Don't let go when you're thrown into the pit of setbacks. Hold on to your dreams. Don't let go when you become enslaved to your circumstances or when you're thrown into prison and defeat. Hold on to your dream because of this. Fifth and last thing, he would say, because God placed you where you are to save lives. That's the whole purpose of Joseph's calling. And you know what? That's the purpose of our calling, is to save lives. Matter of fact, somebody this morning, they're out at the track working, and they sent me a text during band practice. They said, there's going to be over 300,000 people out here. And they said, I wonder how many of them know Jesus Christ. And I responded back, I said, well, you can start going one by one and find out. Might take you a little bit, right? But you could go, you get an opportunity because here Joseph said, like, don't give up on your dreams because God has placed you where you are to save lives. This is the whole premise. It was the fulfillment of the promise, the fulfillment of the dreams that he had. And then one day there's this famine, Pharaoh's dream comes true as God interprets it through Joseph. And there's this famine and there's no food. And Joseph stores up all this grain to save an entire nation and surrounding nations, to where then his brothers and his father have to come down to Egypt for food. And his brothers find out that this leader of the land is their brother, and now they are scared for their lives because now it's the day of reckoning. Right? It's payback time. And what's on Joseph's mind? Same way with Jacob. Remember, Jacob was the same way. It's like, man, I deceived Esau, and now I got to go back. And he was kind of a weenie, and sent the women and the children and all the animals rather than confronting it like a man, And so then God shows up and says, look, buddy, and he wrestles with God. He says, look, I'm going to change you from this day on, and you're going to have a limp. But you're going to tell the world about this limp because I'm changing your life. And Joseph, he's learned from the things that his dad went through. And so Joseph, in this moment, his brothers are fearful. And it says here, in what is the verse? Put it up there. Genesis 45, verse 5. I missed putting the reference. I got it here. So Joseph says this. He tells his brothers, but don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place. It was God who sent me here ahead of you to preserve your lives. And I think sometimes when we're in the midst of pain and we're in the midst of setbacks, it's easy to lose perspective of what God is doing. There's a much bigger picture, and we've got to teach our kids that God's after something so much bigger than trophies. So much bigger than achievements. Everybody's graduating. There's people from graduating, right, from third grade, fifth grade, whatever grades they graduate from, and as seniors, right? And there's all these achievements, right? And there's all these trophies, all these certificates, all these things. And like I told you, the only thing that I carried with me into my adulthood was God's Word. The only thing, becoming a member of a church. It's the only thing that's lasting, and that'll last beyond my life. That's what matters. And he says, God's the one that sent me here ahead of you. Verse 8, it says, so it was God who sent me here. He repeats this over and over again. Remember I told you this is the Hebrews way of repetition. This is what God wants us to understand. God's the one that sets us where we are. Right. And sometimes it's hard to make sense. Sometimes, why am I here? Why am I going through this? Because God's put you there for a purpose. And sometimes it may be really difficult, but God has you there for a reason. And then the last verse, Genesis 50, verse 20. Once again, now Joseph is at the end of his life, and his brothers are fearful. What's going to happen when Jacob's gone? What's going to happen? How's he going to respond? Jacob's going to die, their dad, and what's he going to do? And Joseph responds, he says, look, you intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. And that's what God's dream is for us. That's what God's calling is for us. He has put us where we are, in our neighborhoods, our community, in our church, in the workplace, in our families, as much as they can drive us crazy, right? Look at Joseph. His family was crazy, right? He put us there to save the lives of many. Amen. So we've got a great work to do, but we are where we are because of God and his calling. Let me pray.